The morning sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the usual HOA patrol had. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where every mailbox needed to be exactly 4.5 inches from the curb, every lawn greener than jealousy itself, and every resident terrified of violating the sacred community guidelines. Unless you were me. I moved into Oakview Estates 3 months ago, nice houses, quiet streets, and unfortunately, one raging Karen named Marjorie Barrett, reigning president of the HOA for the past decade. Short blonde bob, neon workout gear, sunglasses too big for her face. And a clipboard, always the clipboard. To her, that thing was a badge of power. To the rest of us, it was a warning sign. She'd never bothered me directly, until today. I was sipping coffee on my porch, wearing a simple gray hoodie and jeans. Nobody here except my neighbors knew who I really was, Sheriff David Hale, recently transferred back to my hometown after years working undercover out of state. I liked the peace. I liked being just Dave, the quiet guy who waved at the mailman. But Karen power-hungry dictators ruin everything. From my porch, I noticed her marching across the street like she owned the entire county. Her eyes were locked on something in my driveway. My car. A black unmarked Ford parked cleanly inside my own property line, nothing illegal. But apparently, the HOA queen had decided it was suspicious. She walked straight up to it and tried the handle. Click. Locked. She tugged harder. Click click. Then she reached into her fanny pack and pulled out a ring of keys. I almost choked on my coffee. Was this woman seriously trying to break into my car? I put the mug down and watched. She tried one key. Then another. And another. Each time, she huffed louder, stamping her foot like a toddler who dropped her lollipop. Ridiculous. She muttered. This master key is supposed to open everything in this neighborhood. Everything? My eyebrow shot up. There was no universe where a single key opened residents' private property, unless she had been illegally obtaining keys. Or she was just delusional enough to believe she deserved universal access. After the 5th failed attempt, she pulled out her phone. Oh. She dialed 911. I couldn't believe it, 911, over her inability to break into my car. I heard her perfectly. Yes, this is an emergency. There's a criminal vehicle parked in our HOA. Suspicious. Probably stolen. And he locked it so I can't check inside for contraband. I nearly laughed. But the dispatcher said something that made her straighten up. Ma'am, a unit is already nearby. Please wait at a safe distance. Time to clock in, apparently. I stood, grabbed my badge from the table, and walked down my steps, making sure she could hear the gravel crunch under my boots. She turned, already gearing up to bark demands. You there. This vehicle doesn't belong in this neighborhood. She said sharply. Move along before the police arrive. I smiled politely. It does belong here. She scoffed. Oh. And who are you to say that? I held up the badge, letting the sunlight glint off the emblem. Sheriff. The look on her face was priceless. She blinked once. Twice. Her mouth opened and closed like a confused goldfish. Her phone slipped from her hand. Well, she stammered, that doesn't prove anything. Anyone can buy a shiny badge online. I chuckled. True. But most fake badges don't come with. I clicked the key fob in my hand. The Ford beeped twice, its headlights flashing. An official county-issued unmarked police vehicle. Her face turned a shade of red usually reserved for stop signs. You didn't tell us you were law enforcement. She snapped. You didn't ask, I replied calmly. She pointed an accusing finger at me like she was about to cast a spell. We have rules here. HOA rules. All vehicles visible from the street must be registered with us. All residents must submit a form for approval. And you, sir, did not. I kept my tone polite but firm. I'm already fully registered with the county. And as law enforcement, I don't report my vehicles to civilians, especially when those civilians are trying to illegally access them. She sputtered, at a complete loss. I was ensuring the safety of our community. She cried. What if you were a criminal? I stepped a little closer, lowering my voice just enough to make her sweat. Well, good news, you found one. Her eyes widened. A criminal? Yes. I pointed at her jingling keys. Possession and attempted use of unauthorized keys to gain unlawful access to private property. Her whole body froze. That's a felony, by the way. A police cruiser rolled up, lights off. My deputy, Deputy Ramirez, stepped out, eyebrow raised. Sheriff? Should I cuff her? Karen squeaked like a mouse stepped on by an elephant. No. She yelped. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. Ramirez smirked. Yeah, that's not actually a government position, ma'am. Karen clutched her clipboard like it was a legal shield. This neighborhood has standards. And he has disrespected all of them. I clipped my badge to my belt and crossed my arms. Marjorie Barrett, correct? She nodded slowly. I think we need to have a deeper conversation about your authority. She gulped. And the misuse of it. For the first time since I moved here, Karen had nothing to say. But knowing her, this wouldn't be over. Not even close. The next few days after my little chat with Marjorie Barrett went by quietly, but the peace was only temporary. I knew it. She knew it. We were both just waiting for the other shoe to drop. What I didn't expect was how fast she would escalate things. It was Wednesday morning when I received the first official letter, a large yellow envelope that looked like it had been delivered straight from some dystopian future where Karen-style complaints were the law of the land. It had an embossed seal with the HOA's official logo, but this time, there was no clipboard. There didn't need to be. I tore open the envelope, reading the first few lines. This letter serves as an official notice of violation for your vehicle being illegally parked in a designated HOA space. This is your first and final warning to comply with the Oakview Estates Residential Parking Code. I couldn't believe it. She was still trying to come for me. Of course, Marjorie wasn't just targeting my car. This letter was a barrage of minor violations, ones that had clearly been fabricated. Fence too high. Mailbox paint fading. Tree overhanging sidewalk. All lies. I sat back and grinned, savoring the fact that this was her attempt to play dirty. That afternoon, I was working on paperwork in my home office when I heard the sound of a car pulling into my driveway. I peeked out from the window to see Marjorie once again standing like a sentinel in front of my house, holding another stack of papers, her face set in a permanent frown. She looked absolutely ridiculous, wearing her neon pink workout gear, large aviators, and white tennis shoes. Every time she wore that, I almost expected her to start a flash mob instead of a confrontation. But this wasn't a casual knock. She was carrying the weight of some new weapon, probably another set of fake complaints. I opened the door with a friendly smile, trying not to look too amused. Good afternoon, Marjorie. What's the emergency this time? Her eyes narrowed when she saw me standing in the doorway, but she forced a stiff smile. I'm here to personally deliver your second violation notice. I raised an eyebrow. A second one? She nodded, thrusting the papers toward me. You've still failed to comply with the HOA's parking guidelines, and I've documented your complete disregard for this community's standards. We can't have this kind of behavior. I didn't take the papers from her immediately. Instead, I looked over at my Ford in the driveway, parked within my property lines, and then looked at her again. "Marjorie, you do realize this is just harassment, right? My car is parked in my driveway, on my property. It's not illegally parked. You're just mad because I'm not asking for permission for every little thing." She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "Do you know what the worst part of this is? It's not even about the car. It's the power trip. You feel like you have authority because you have a clipboard and a list of rules, but guess what? Not all of us are scared of your little fiefdom." Her eyes flashed, and she dropped the papers. I thought she might have a meltdown right there, but instead, she stood upright, hands on her hips. "I'm not scared of you, Sheriff," she said through gritted teeth. "This community has rules, and you will follow them." I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe, almost amused by her righteous fury. "And who will make me?" "You?" Her voice was sharp, but her eyes betrayed her. She knew it was a losing battle. "I will be taking this matter to the Oakview Estates HOA board. The board will vote on this and take the necessary actions. You'll see." I couldn't help myself. I let out a chuckle. "Oh, I'm sure the board is just waiting to fight your battles. You've really got this all figured out, don't you?" With that, she spun on her heel and marched off, muttering to herself. But I could see it in her eyes. She was furious. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The HOA showdown. The next meeting was scheduled just days later, a mandatory HOA board meeting, held in the local community center. Marjorie had clearly rallied her troops for this one, and I could practically smell the tension in the air as I entered. I wasn't surprised by how packed the room was. Most of the residents weren't there because they cared about HOA politics. They were there because they had finally gotten tired of Marjorie's petty rule enforcement. Still, the whole vibe felt like an episode of The Real Housewives, if that show had a legal team and a prison sentence attached to it. I sat down near the back, casually waiting for the drama to unfold. Marjorie walked in, head held high, like she was the queen of the room. She didn't see me at first, so I slipped my badge into my pocket, making sure to keep a low profile. The board began with introductions, but it didn't take long before Marjorie stood up, clipboard raised like a weapon. She read off her official complaints, each one more ridiculous than the last. The room was silent, eyes darting between her and me. Then it was my turn. I stood up, slowly making my way to the front, drawing the eyes of the entire room. I didn't say anything at first. I just pulled out a stack of papers, my counterclaims. "I've received multiple complaints from the HOA president," I said, pausing for effect. "But these aren't about my car. These are about false allegations. And this," I held up one document, "is about her attempting to access my private property with a master key without permission." The board went dead silent. Marjorie's face was pure fury. "You're accusing me of..." "Oh, I am," I interrupted. "And I have the proof." Marjorie's jaw clenched so tight I thought she might crack a tooth as the HOA board stared at me, wide-eyed and suddenly very unsure of whose side they were supposed to be on. I placed the incident report on the table where everyone could see it. It detailed her attempt to unlock my sheriff-issued Ford, my personal police vehicle, with her so-called master key. "Not only is this harassment," I continued, "but her actions could be considered attempted vehicle tampering. A crime. You know, one of those things you typically call the police for." A few people in the room chuckled under their breath. One man actually spoke up. "Wait. You're a sheriff?" Marjorie turned, panic spreading across her face like spilled coffee. You never said you were law enforcement," she shouted. I shrugged. "Didn't think it mattered. You were too busy writing me up for imaginary violations." Some of the board members exchanged uncomfortable looks. The president cleared his throat and whispered something to the secretary, who started scribbling notes faster than a court stenographer at a murder trial. I leaned forward. "Now, I'm a reasonable man," I said. If this ends today, we can forget about this whole situation. But Marjorie? Her pride was allergic to backing down. That's not how this works. She snapped. He violated parking rules. The HOA has power here. We set the rules. We enforce them. She stomped toward me like she owned the floor. You think just because you're a cop, you can park however you want? You're not above the law. I smiled politely. Actually, I am the law here. That sentence did exactly what I intended. It shut her up, at least temporarily. The phone call that changed everything. The board decided to table the discussion, meaning they realized they were outmatched and wanted to run away from confrontation. Meeting adjourned. But for Marjorie? She wasn't finished. She stormed outside and dialed 911 right in front of me, pacing like a toddler who just got told no. Yes, yes. I need the police immediately. She shrieked into the phone. He's threatening me. He's impersonating an officer. I sighed. This again? While she was too busy yelling at dispatch about how unfair the world was, a police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. 2 deputies stepped out. When they saw me, their expressions shifted instantly, from alert to confused, then to a barely contained grin. Sheriff Dalton? One said. You, need help with something? We got a call. Before I could answer, Marjorie ran to them, practically tripping over her white sneakers, pointing an accusatory finger at me. That's him. Arrest him. He tried to break into a police car and now he's pretending to be a sheriff. The deputies exchanged a long look before one replied, "Ma'am. That is the sheriff." It was beautiful. Pure cinematic glory. The moment the words hit her ears, she froze. If embarrassment were visible, it would have poured off her like steam. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible. He lives in this neighborhood." I stepped closer. Shocking, isn't it? Cops are people too, we live places. She backed up, face pale. This isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to go. One deputy took my lead. "Ma'am, you can't make false emergency calls. You understand how serious this is?" She sputtered, reaching for anything to regain control, but the illusion of power was gone. She looked small, just a woman with a clipboard who finally met a brick wall she couldn't push. "Consider this a warning," I told her. "Next time, the charges will be real." The HOA panic. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood knew the story. Word travels at light speed when people dislike the person in charge. Neighbors who never spoke to me before smiled, waved, and even brought baked goods to my doorstep. One elderly man with arthritis finally muttered, "Thank you." Someone needed to stand up to that woman. Meanwhile, Marjorie stayed inside. Her curtains twitched like paranoid eyebrows whenever anyone walked by. And honestly, I thought the nightmare was finally over. But it wasn't. Because there's one thing worse than a Karen with power. A Karen whose power is threatened. The revenge attempt. 3 days later, I returned home from work to find tow trucks surrounding my driveway. 3 of them. And guess what vehicle they were after? Yep. My patrol car. Marjorie stood confidently in her navy blue blazer and black slacks, clipboard clutched like a Bible, barking orders. "That vehicle violates community standards," she shouted. "Remove it immediately." The towing crew was hesitant, they kept glancing at my plates, which clearly displayed sheriff. But Karen power is a dangerous drug, and she was overdosing. "Don't be afraid," she yelled. "He doesn't own this street." "I do." The men still hesitated. Until I stepped around the corner. I was in uniform. Hat, badge, belt, firearm, all of it. Her face went full ghost white. "Oh," she croaked. "Oh," I repeated. "You were saying?" One of the tow truck drivers instantly dropped the chains, stammering apologies. The others backed away like they were avoiding a live grenade. "Ma'am," I said slowly, savoring every moment, "you are now interfering with a law enforcement vehicle. That's a felony." She couldn't answer. She could barely breathe. "Next time you call a tow truck," I said, "make sure it isn't for the sheriff's car." Marjorie wasn't just defeated. She was cornered. And a cornered Karen is unpredictable. The war wasn't over. But soon, I was going to end it. For good. Marjorie avoided me for a full week after the tow truck fiasco. The neighborhood practically celebrated the peace and quiet. Kids rode bikes again. People walked their dogs without fear of a surprise fine. And every time someone saw me, they whispered, "Is it over?" I thought so too. Until a certified letter arrived. Delivered by courier. Stamped with red ink. Final notice of forced compliance. I stared at it for a moment, then laughed. Loud. Because it was so aggressively ridiculous, only a desperate Karen would send something like that. Inside the envelope. A demand. Remove your patrol car from the neighborhood permanently. Pay $12,750 in HOA violation fines. Or face property seizure. Property seizure. From the HOA. I swear, I almost framed the letter for comedy value. But instead, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew would change everything. "Commissioner? Sheriff Dalton here. Yeah. It's time. The board meeting to end all board meetings." 2 days later, the HOA held an emergency vote. This time, the room was packed. Neighbors filled every chair and stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls. People murmured about abuse of power and were fed up. And there, front and center, was Marjorie wearing her fanciest outfit yet, a pearl white blouse, a floral skirt, and that same arrogant chin tilt she always used to pretend she was taller. The board president cleared his throat nervously. "We are here to address ongoing issues with Mr. Dalton's non-compliance." I cut him off. "Actually, no. You're here because your HOA president has violated several state laws." Gasps swept the room. Marjorie stood, slamming her hands on the table. "This is my meeting. You do not get to dictate." "Officer," I said. Right on cue, the door opened. 3 uniformed deputies walked in. Followed by the assistant district attorney. The entire room froze. Even the air seemed offended. I stepped forward, holding up a folder filled with documents. "For weeks, your HOA president has issued fraudulent violations, made false 911 calls, attempted to access a law enforcement vehicle, and interfered with police property. These are criminal offenses. And we have every one of them on record." The ADA nodded. "We have obtained a warrant for questioning." Marjorie's strength evaporated. She stumbled backward, grabbing her clipboard like a life raft. "You can't arrest me. I was trying to protect community standards." "By committing crimes?" I asked calmly. A deputy approached her. She shrieked. "You are all making a mistake. I am the HOA." That line is going to echo in my head forever. The HOA collapses. As Marjorie was escorted out, still yelling like a cat losing a wrestling match, something remarkable happened. Applause. Loud. Explosive. Cathartic. The board president stood there in stunned silence. He looked at me with something between gratitude and pure dread. "What now?" he asked softly. I placed a packet of papers in front of him, a petition. Signed by over 80% of the community. I think it's time for a vote, I replied. A real one. The board voted unanimously. Heavy checkmark Marjorie was removed from her position. Heavy checkmark all fines she issued were voided. Heavy checkmark the HOA was suspended pending full audit. For the first time in 2 decades. Oakview Estates had no HOA. And everyone knew who to thank. Freedom, finally. The next morning was the quietest and happiest one the neighborhood had seen in ages. No patrols. No violation slips. No threats of fines. Kids chalked sidewalks. Neighbors added flags and potted plants, things that used to trigger penalties. One guy even parked his RV in his driveway like he was claiming territory after a war. The community actually looked alive for once. I sat on my porch drinking fresh coffee, watching all of it unfold. Peace. At last. A new beginning. A week later, a small group of neighbors approached me with a request. Sheriff. Would you consider leading the new community council? I nearly spit out my drink. Me? The guy who parks a patrol car on the driveway? The elderly man with arthritis chuckled. That's exactly why. Their voices were hopeful. Sincere. And I realized something. This place didn't need a dictator with a clipboard. It needed someone who actually cared about people. I looked around at the faces waiting for an answer. All right, I said. But no clipboards. Laughter erupted. And for the first time since moving in, I felt truly at home. Epilogue, the final report. Marjorie? She struck a plea deal. Community service. Ironically. Cleaning public parking lots. Last I heard, she quit Oakview Estates and moved to another HOA, one across town. If they only knew what storm just arrived. But as for my neighborhood? We were free. And better than ever. Because sometimes the law isn't the paperwork. It's the person who stands up and says, enough. And I was happy to be that person.